You can't get in? I thought they finally fixed it.
They did, but the thing is, I don't have a registration date.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, same here.
Well, anyway, I'm planning to let anybody in that wants in, but my opinion is often not important in these matters. Remember this semester, I could not let people in CNIT 40. There was just no way to add them at all because they followed it up. But they're doing better. So it's possible they will allow people to add to CNIT 50. Yep.
Oh, that whole registration is weird.
It's very strange, but they finally did get CNIT 40 added to the schedule, so some people can register, which is better than they've been able to do in years. So I think the tide is turning. Anyway, so this, let me just take a look at the news, and I think there's lots of exciting news, as there usually is in this business. All right. Automation. Oh, there you go. This is appropriate for the season. There you go. This is the latest robot. Latest Boston Dynamics robots. So there you go. That should cheer things up. All right, so this actually used to be a homework in one of my classes. You can, if you want to find out about SSH brute force attacks, all you have to do is make a server and open port 22, and within a few seconds, you'll start getting them. The entire internet is scanned by bots, and anybody with port 22 open, people try to log in. And if you want to see what they're using for names and passwords, you need a Trojan version of SSH. And SSH is open source, so there are blogs out there, and I put it in my homework at other classes. You just modify SSH to log the passwords and let it go. And there's a bunch of them out there. There are SSH clients copied from the original, which steal your password and send it off to attackers. And these guys have been hunting them down on the web and finding them, because if you load from an untrusted source, which most people do, then that could certainly happen to you. So I've never heard of this before. She has this Russian agent that was supporting the NRA, and I think in some ways involved with Trump, has pleaded guilty to espionage, which is pretty extreme. So we'll see what comes out of all that. It's not common that people plead guilty of espionage. So the PlayStation Classic is being hacked like crazy because the boot ROM does not verify the signature, and they encrypted stuff and then hid the key on the device where you can just find it. So they sound like they're acting just like every Android app I've looked at. On we go. Now this is, there's been argument forever about the PlayStation. GeoHot was punished for hacking the PlayStation, and a lot of people thought the PlayStation should be hackable. That makes it more of a fun game, and other people, but Sony seem to feel like it's terrible to hack the PlayStation, and they're trying to stop it. It's very unclear whether they should stop it, whether they have the right to stop it, whether it's a crime to do it. None of this stuff is very clear. So Ethereum clients, by default, are listening on an API call, and just like Mongo databases, they're fantastically insecure. And you're not supposed to expose that port, and a lot of people are. So they're getting hacked like crazy over port 8545. That's opposed to both the miners and the wallets. All right. And yeah, what's up?
Sorry.
Yeah.
You get my inputs?
Yeah, I replied. You're done.
Oh, we're good.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, take a look. You'll see. Yeah.
I'll see you next semester.
Okay, sure. Oh, yeah. All right. Anyway, might be interesting, and this one might be too. Yeah, all right, so here's a few more that are kind of fun. So Michael Bloomberg is rich. I think he wants to run for president. He was the mayor of New York City. He runs a huge newspaper enterprise, but my interest in him started about a month ago when they published a earth-shaking story about Chinese supply chain attacks, which was just absolutely fabricated and false. And everybody came out with proof that they were lies. None of it was true. The guy that said it was a lie, and he absolutely refuses to retract it or do anything about it. So I have quit reading Bloomberg since then because it's worse than Fox News. I know I'm reading complete lies, shameless lies, and I'll never admit they're wrong. But the other thing he did is he said as soon as he's going to run for office, he wants to order his paper not to criticize him in any way. And he's not, for some reason, not quite blatant enough to just order them to criticize the other people but not him. So he says they're going to stop covering politics entirely as soon as he runs for office, so that he isn't paying employees to criticize him, which is interesting. And we'll see what happens. It's very, you know, especially in the age of Trump, we're having a sort of renegotiation in our society of the role of the free press. Trump is very much against the free press, like most such dictators are, and he has a large body of people that support that. So Google got hacked again with Google Plus, and so they're just going to close it 4 months early. Google Plus has just been a disaster. It's the third or fourth attempt by Google to make a social network. Every single one of them have gone down in god-awful flames. They just don't have the skill to do it, and maybe they're ready to finally admit that. I don't know. It is one of the lessons I've really seen coming up in information security in the last year or two is that you have to have a lot more respect for non-technical people. The mathematically technical people are brilliant at Google, and yet it's not enough. The other things that require more human emotions and stuff, they just don't have it, and they can't get anywhere. And you know, that was the thing about Zuckerberg. And he appears to be a horrible person, but he understands what a party is. He knows what people want out of a social network, and Google just does not understand it. They think there's going to be a mathematical equation explaining what people want out of a social network, and they can't get that stupid idea out of their head. So they just have one more disaster after another. This one's kind of fun. New hacking tools. The one here is password spraying. This is a simple attack. If you find like 1,000 user accounts, you could try hacking into one by trying thousands of passwords, or you could just take the top 10 passwords and try it with every account, which is going to get you in almost every time because some clown will have used their obvious password. So that's, they call that password spraying, which is a fine technique. DHS has got the ability to de-anonymize Bitcoin transactions, which has been known for a while. They also have the ability to de-anonymize Tor pretty much. And now they're doing a feasibility study to see if they can hack into the privacy coins. Monero and Zcash are supposed to take the Bitcoin addresses and then scramble them through another layer of sort of random addresses, so it's even harder to tie them to accounts, but they still end up in a public blockchain. So all the data is there, and they're researching, is there a way to de-anonymize them, because they regard Bitcoin as a solved problem, which is why it was always very bizarre that people commit crimes on Bitcoin. When there's a public ledger of everything you do, it would seem like the worst possible currency to use for crime. And I think it's turning out that way. These other ones are specifically designed to hide what you're doing, to facilitate crime, and we'll see if they do. Anyway, so this is the last class. This is 152, and I am reluctant to add a new topic at the end, and we're going to have a guest speaker that flaked out, so I made this extra credit. It's not on the final, but there is a quiz you can take if you want extra credit, and the iClickers will be worth extra credit. And so I'm going to start talking about OS 10, and I'll do a bit of it, and then I'll stop, and he can do a talk about jobs, and then I'll carry on. So let's start with this and go up like the first iClickers. And it'd be good to do something else for a little while. At first, this is a little befuddling. The Mac has advertised itself as the most advanced operating system in the world, and that is very arguably correct, because they're based on BSD Unix, which is one of the earliest and most advanced forms of Unix and the most difficult. BSD's logo is a little devil, and they are not kidding. It is hard to use. And the Mac has put a very sophisticated graphical interface on top of something that is really, really complicated. Far more complicated than Windows. And we'll find here every possible Windows feature has a Mac analog, and a bunch of other things are much more complicated. So the HFS file system is the main one covered in your book. They just have a new one called Apple File System that came out a couple of years ago. It seems not to be much different, really. And we'll talk about some of these artifacts to look for in here. This is the new one, Apple File System, out with High Sierra, which is at the latest version, I think. No, I guess the latest version is something, I'm not sure. Anyway, It's in 10.13. I think that is the latest version. And the point of this was not necessarily to add features you'll notice on the Mac, but to do what Microsoft attempted to do with Windows 8 disastrously, is unify the OS across their various devices, because now they got the watch and the phone and the tablet and the Air and the big fancy system, and they want them all to be unified as much as possible, and that's the goal. And therefore they want an OS that can support powerful, huge things and also small storage devices. Microsoft didn't really get there. Microsoft had FAT file system for the small computers, and then they had NTFS, which was less efficient on small drives and more efficient on big drives. And they never were able to come up with another one. They promised another one many times and had developments and just abandoned them. Mac's trying to go to a more modern one that can be efficient on both small and large storage devices. So this is the current version of it. It has no support for hard links, which is interesting, not too important, I suppose, but anyway, it sounds fine. But they say Time Machine cannot use the new file system yet because it relies on hard links. This kind of reminds me of Microsoft's ReFS, and before that they had a volume accumulating file system. In both cases, they made a file system which their own software could not support. And you can't boot from a ReFS volume, and Apple seems to have done the same thing, although I think unlike Microsoft, Apple is going to improve it and add it. But their new file system is not even compatible with all of Apple's technology, which is a sort of disturbing place to be. It means, of course, that you have to keep using the old one. There's a lot of things like this. The new encrypted DNS protocol that is taking over is DOE, DNS over HTTP, and it makes no sense at all because you cannot make an HTTPS connection until you made a DNS request. So you have to do insecure DNS to boot and get to the secure DNS. And that's the same kind of thing here. You have to have the old file system for your backup, but the new file system for running, and there's a lot of things like that. One good example is BGP, Border Gateway Protocol that runs the entire internet, has been upgraded to IP version 6, but the identifier for a node is its IP version 4 address, and that has never changed, so you cannot run it over IPv6 alone. It's always got IP version 4 in it. They're both going. Anyway, the hierarchical file system has all the features you might expect. Journaling means that if it crashes, it remembers what it's doing. It keeps track of what it's doing. So if it crashes partway through like a file copy operation, it will instead not be like FAT, which would be lost when it reboots and finds these clusters and not know what they are. It would be like NTFS, a journaling system. It would just look at the journal and say, I was copying a file. I was up to block 10,000. I will resume at block 10,001 and just finish copying the file. Most of the time, it will not corrupt the drive, not mess anything up because it remembers what it was doing. And it has encryption, which is, of course, a big, big deal for portable devices. It has 9 structures on the drive. And yeah.
What does it EV mean?
EV?
Encryption, the last side. AE.
I think it's some enormous exabyte or something. It's some enormous quantity of data. Bigger than terabytes, like 1,000 terabytes, a million terabytes, some enormous size. So, I mean, it's 64-bit system, so it can address an enormous amount of storage, far more than anybody can afford to buy.
Not as much as Zen.
I think that's right. I haven't got it memorized. I think exabyte is 1,000 terabytes, but I'm not quite sure. Zeta is even more. I think that's right. But way out there. That's the idea. Yeah, and it's a good thing to point out because Microsoft's NTFS does not go that far at all. It has weird limitations that stop it from getting very high. The math would go high enough, but there are other internal limitations. Anyway, it's just a theoretical issue right now. Anyway, nobody can afford to buy those. So you got all these structures inside here that are all working together. You may remember when you talked about the Windows file system, it was mostly the master file table, an index file, and a few other things in NTFS. Here they are. You're all essentially analog to the Microsoft system because there really are no new ideas here. Every OS implements essentially the same fundamental ideas. So they're lined up in the disk. By the way, one thing to notice is you've got a volume header at the top and you've got an alternate volume header here. That's exactly the same thing as NTFS. The master file table is absolutely essential, and so there's a second copy of it stored on the drive. It's the same thing here because if you were to lose that, you'd lose everything. So it's not okay to have just one copy. You have 2 copies of it. So there's boot blocks, which are legacy and not used anymore. Then there's a volume header, the alternate volume header, and this has the information about the volume. This is basically the partition table, saying the other stage items on there. And in here, you'll find things like the startup file and the allocation file, and these other files we're going to use are referred to here so you can find them. There's a disk editor. There does not seem to be a modern binary disk editor. The only one I can find is so old it runs on 32-bit, and all the Mac OSs have been 64 for a long time. You have to install special extra software to run this thing. It's called iBoard, and you can use it to examine your disk in principle. I did it on an older Mac. I didn't bother to try it again on a newer Mac. This is a fundamental problem with the Mac. There's always very few free utilities to do anything, and almost all of them are very old and only work on older versions. This is true of almost all forensic tools. There are no forensic tools that really do much of anything good on a Mac unless you pay a lot of money. Black Bag has them, Encase and FTK has them, and they cost thousands of dollars. And there's no free stuff that works. All the free stuff only works on several generations back because Apple changes things a lot and they don't document it. It's all proprietary. And so it takes years for the tool developers to catch up. And the only ones that stay current are the ones that are making a pile of money developing their tools. So a Mac has a lot of timestamps. They're all in local time. It has 4 timestamps: create, modify, backup, and check to date. And other ones on files. The inode is a Unix term. The inode is the metadata for a file that says where it is and how big it is and such in the name, like a directory entry in Windows. You can use the stat command at the command line to see all those timestamps for your file. And you can go to the allocation file. The allocation file has a bit for every block, and if it's 1, it's in use, and if it's 0, it's available. They all have to have some system like this. It has the same property as other file systems that when you delete something, it's not really gone, it's just marked available, and it's erased later. They all do that on magnetic hard drives to make the operation faster. On SSDs, there is trim running in the background, which is supported by the older Mac file system and the new one. So if you have the right version of everything and your trim is working, then the SSD controller all by itself will be cleaning up the blocks that have been deleted in order to create contiguous blocks of empty space to optimize performance. So in practice, when files are deleted on an SSD, they mostly do evaporate within a few seconds, but it does not necessarily erase them all. Anyway, then there's more extents. Extents are the contiguous blocks of data allocated to a file. These are like the data runs in NTFS that list the sectors that have to be reassembled to read the file. And then you have a catalog file. Every file has a catalog node ID, and this tells it where the files are. And there's an attributes file, which is additional metadata. This is like alternate data streams, and stores the origin of files. It also serves the purpose of an alternate data stream we've seen in Windows, where when you download something, it will mark it, this is downloaded from the internet and then unsafe, and you have to right-click it and go to properties to approve it to run. Mac has their version of the same thing. Everybody faces the same problems and have essentially the same solutions in just a different language. The startup file is no longer used anymore. It's left over from old stuff. So there's 2 file system services. There's Spotlight, which is the magnifying glass in the corner, and there's managed storage. The Spotlight is up there in the corner. The magnifying glass, that is the search thing. In Microsoft Windows XP, Microsoft had Rover the search dog. Ever since Windows Vista and Windows 7 and Windows 10, they have a search bar at the bottom. It is fantastically terrible. It always has been. If you install a program and then go to the search, you can't find the program on their own start menu. It's just amazing how useless it is in the Windows system. The Mac one actually works. You can search for things, it'll find them right away. It is very strange that Microsoft can't even index your own hard drive and find a file that's right there, but they can't. And they don't seem to be aware of this. They don't seem to even have any plans to fix it. It was Windows 95 when Bill Gates said, in 6 months, I'm going to have a search engine better than Google. And the world has been laughing ever since. Anyway, so Spotlight searches through the metadata on the file, and it has an indexer running, which indexes files. It looks not only at the name of the file, but also a lot of the content. And so it can find things really quite quickly. You can search a live system if you want to search for something. It's not a lot of use for static acquisition, but you can find live data. This is all I've ever been able to get from Macs is live response. I run bash shell scripts and get the live data. I've never retrieved deleted data from Mac except with specific tools just for that purpose, like eraser on them. There's another one called disk drill. And all I did with disk drill on my Macs was observe the data and watch it vanish within seconds, because every Mac I've had, it had an SSD on it. You're really not going to get any latent data from a Mac unless you get a Mac with a magnetic hard drive or some Mac where somebody got a third-party SSD without exactly the right driver, so it doesn't have trim happening. Anyway, so managed storage is the equivalent of Microsoft's volume shadow services. This is the automatic backup. This is something Microsoft moved to in Server 2003, and the Mac has it too. You can make an application that just constantly saves the file. You don't have to wait until the user clicks File Save. It saves versions, so there are previous versions of your file available. And so it puts them here in Document Revisions V100 directory under a hidden directory, and you can go in there, and it's still true of the very latest Mac OS. I tried it today on my Mac. It's still in the same place. If you go in here, you will find databases. They're SQLite databases. Most Mac internal systems are stored in SQLite databases and plist files. And the plist files are sometimes readable text and sometimes binary, and there are Mac utilities to read them. But it stores things in SQLite, and you can't read a SQLite file entirely by just opening a text editor, although a lot of it is plain text. You have to get a SQLite viewer. There's a bunch of free SQLite viewers. So I downloaded one. And so here you see the name of the file, and this is file number 6. And if you go to the other file, you can get the details of this. And this file has 394 revisions. Here's what page 394 revisions were saved of this file. It's automatically saving constantly. Doesn't mean there's 394 complete copies of the file. There's just little changes. But it does mean, in principle, you could reconstruct many versions of it into the past. All right. So I got some cahoots about that stuff. Let me bring it up. Oh, I may not have my cahoots ready. Aha. I think I don't. I'm going to pass it on to you. Do you need my computer? Oh, all right. Right. All right. I can do that. Let me pause the recording, and you can do your
Social security card.
All right.
People come in to like thank you very you issue up when they had a card and no one will check monitoring credit for like a 5-year-old because you shouldn't have credit. But that's to show you how big the system is that someone would know it's a 5-year-old.
Well, let's give it a shot. There we go. Good. Oh.
Yeah. Right. The next 2 words per number. The last 4 words is serial number. And that's it. Writes information about the process and students essence are being and they're currently assigned based on the state code. Mailing address provided the instant application. The area of first regions. Yeah, and then the population states in certain U.S. benefits are allocated 1 hand each, whereas other states are allocated 7 hands. Units are assigned and decided non-consecutive order 0, 1, and 9.
What is going to be the odd number first and what numbers come back?
All right, I'll wait a few more seconds. This may be all we have. Good, it's recording. Oh, more people coming. Okay, good.
And the serial numbers are assigned consecutively from 0001 to 99. Yeah. This is from 2009.
All right. So where are the CNIDs? Those are in the catalog files. There's something like inode numbers, unique identifiers of a file. All right. Where's 1 bit for every block? All right, that's the allocation file. That one makes sense. All right. Which one? Indexes files by content. but then deletes the indexes. Okay, that's Spotlight, which we talked about. That's the search engine. It's pretty cool, but it does not help you retrieve deleted data. All right. So where do you find copies of previous versions? That's managed storage. That's the automatic multiple version. That's the equivalent of Microsoft Shadow copies. Anyway, so let me record the winners. Good. I know who these people are. Good. All right. And let's carry on here. So the operating system data, there are 4 domains of data in the Mac, which is a pretty good idea. Local data, system data, network, and user, just categories. And so local domain is applications and their configurations. Requires administrative privilege to modify, and it's an applications, developer, and library. This is where installed software goes. The system domain is the standard Unix file system, bin, user, dev, etc., and a few other similar things. Here, let me shut this thing. All right. This is where you find the Unix stuff and some other things that Apple has added. So this is where you also find the system logs, like in Unix, and that's obviously valuable to us. The network domain is things stored among a network of users. In practice, this is not used. I think it's a legacy from some earlier. Apple's had many versions of sharing that have come and gone. And then there's the user domain, which is like Microsoft's user profiles. This is where everything specific to that user is going to be, like their desktop and their documents and their music. And this is, of course, of great importance when you want to find out what user did something. So that's obviously quite valuable. So MacPorts is a package manager. This is like apt-get, one of the many ones. There's another one called Homebrew, and these are things you often have to have. And people install a lot of software with them. So here's the local domain. This is applications where all the installed applications go, primarily maybe the typical Windows installer. You run this, double-click something and see this standard animation, which comes from Microsoft. In Apple, it's always just drag this into the applications folder, and that's installing it. It's the same, essentially the same thing. So everything is in one file called a bundle. Same thing's true of Android apps. It is really a folder, but they call it a bundle. You can right-click and show package contents. And this has all the pieces inside there. It's treated as a single file, which is a pretty good idea because you wouldn't want to move just part of it. I remember helping a student in the lab this week, and he wanted to make a copy of his virtual machine, and it wasn't obvious to him that you just need to get your virtual machine needs to be a folder. You just copy the whole folder. And that's the kind of thing. There's a bunch of things that logically should only move together. It's a good idea to have this bundle system. It's too bad they don't have it on PCs. Anyway, so you got all these things in here. So app is the launchable application, and you have these other things like framework and plugin and kernel extensions. Kernel extensions are present in every operating system, and they are dangerous. I bricked my Mac once with a kernel extension from a third-party developer. I was at a Cloudflare security conference, and he said, I developed this anti-ransomware thing for your Mac. You should try it out. So I tried it, and it bricked my Mac. And I'm like, dude, it won't even boot up. He's like, oh, that doesn't matter. I said, dude, I think that matters. and Tom figured it out. Thank God he figured out because I had encryption turned on. You turn off encryption, and my Mac came back. So I said, dude, you should put a warning on it. He says, oh, no, it doesn't matter. I'm like, I think it matters. Anyway. I didn't put in on any more free kernel extensions after that. This is why I got to follow Kirk and have a virtual Mac if I'm going to do stupid things like that, and so should you. Anyway, that's why we found some good Mac malware. I would have put it in this course. We used the virtual Mac and analyzed the Mac malware, but there isn't that much Mac malware. Anyway, so you can right-click and show package contents, and then you'll find subdirectories in here. Your developer can put whatever they want in whatever directory, but you'll see them in here. So here's the console app, and it's down here. Mac OS console is there, and you can open it up and see what's inside it, and there's a lot of languages and such. And there's going to be the executable is here, console, and there's other things associated with it. A typical folder full of things. So the package contents contains metadata. Those individual files inside there also have time and date stamps, and you could totally hide data inside the packages, and that would be a moderately covert place to hide them. So /developer is Apple's development environment. This is where you're supposed to put the software development kit and all the tools from Apple. Xcode is what Apple calls that. You install Xcode is all the developer tools. They've started moving into other places, but this used to be where all the developer tools go. Then there's library. These are the app settings for the operating system. And there are user-specific settings in your username. I've gotten used to this. This is where the Android software development kit stuff goes, in your user profile in the library directory. Then there's application support, which is very much like Microsoft's app data directory. Everybody has essentially the same structure with just a different name. These are the settings for the application, things like licensing information and personal settings. Then there's caches, of course. Everybody has to have a cache for temporary storage of data, and they're here just like every other OS has. Every application has its cache too. And then there are frameworks for drivers and helpers and utilities that come with the app. Like VMware has a bunch of things that come with it, like Virtual Network Manager and all that jazz. And there's Keychains. Apple has this system to give you secure storage of local passwords and keys and other things. Android has it too. They work hard to secure it. It would really be nice if people would actually use it. I don't know about iOS apps. I know Android apps typically just ignore the keychain and don't use it and put secrets in stupid places. I'm not sure about iOS apps. Maybe they actually put secrets in the keychain more. It's not easy to tell anymore because you can't jailbreak modern iPhones with any free tools. Then there are logs, of course, logs all over the place. These are put in, there's no standard format necessarily for what's in the log. These are put in by the developer, just like another log, but they're there. And this is why I've become a real fan of Splunk. Splunk is the tool that helps you hunt through a lot of logs that are all in different formats. That is the real case we've all got, and that's not going to change anytime soon because every developer just makes up their own stupid log format. And you do need to accumulate them all to find out what's going on. So you have the same problem Google has. You have a pile of data that is totally unstructured and all different, and yet you want to search it, and Splunk is the best engine to do that. Then you got preferences all over the place, and these are stored in those plist files, like I talked about. There's a thing called the registry in Windows, but before there was the registry in MS-DOS and Windows 3.1, you had a different system where every application had its own configuration file. And this is the way Unix has always been. Like Apache has its configuration and Samba has its configuration, and they're each in a different format and each in a different folder because the people that develop the software are not tied to any one operating system. They develop it for Unix and it goes on many different versions of Unix. So Apple has stuck to that older system. So the information about each app is stored in a plist file in that app. So and there are different formats of plist available. When you install an app, it saves a receipt of the app, which is the replacement of Microsoft's Windows registry. The registry has information to run that uninstall utility that Microsoft has, add or remove programs so you can remove it. Apple doesn't have that, so they have this receipt file, which stores all the information about how I installed this and hopefully how to uninstall it. I know the Microsoft Windows uninstaller is fabulously ineffective. And when you install an app and remove it, it leaves junk behind and messes up your operating system. I'm not sure about the Mac. It might work better, but this is the system for it. In this receipts file, it's got the install history that lists them all. And it's still the same on Mojave. I went and looked. I looked in this folder and I found my install history for things that have been installed on my machine, like Numbers and Pages and iMovie, Apple utilities. And I went into the receipt and I found the receipt for Smalltron, my text editor. So it tells you exactly which version and what I added, and that's what you need. This is interesting if you want to know who's been installing apps on the OS, which is often the case because bad guys install some app and then use it. This is kind of mind-boggling. I thought this is awesome. There's Apache included in Mac everywhere, and you can turn it on and it shares your stuff as a web page. And I said, that's mind-boggling, and so they removed this long ago because that is completely insane. Every Mac is a web server just sharing up stuff, just asking for it. They figured that out back in 10.8. There's a folder for it, but this is a useless appendix. If you want to install Apache, you have to install it from the command line and manage it yourself, and it's not something you expect an average Mac to do. Microsoft had similar insane ideas. Like when Windows Vista first came out, they promised that they were going to use the RAM of other machines on your LAN to give you more RAM. So your application would store data on somebody else's machine. And I was like salivating. Oh my God, they're going to just take their data and put it right on my machine. This is going to be great. And somebody figured this out, and they didn't actually bring that out. That would be insane. Like, every single Mac is a web server. You can just do cross-site scripting and SQL injection. This would be awesome. And somebody figured that out. That's insane. You know, when Microsoft did the same thing before Windows 2000, if you installed Windows NT, it was automatically a Telnet server, an FTP server, a web server, and a file server without you turning anything on. They just turned everything on by default for convenience. So you think you're just running a web server and Telnet's on with the password you didn't change and stuff, and they get hacked like crazy. Anyway, that was long ago, like 15 years ago. It was standard to just turn on every service because nobody thought about security at all, but you know, it changed. So anyway, you got these property list files, and there's a PL util file available to look at them, and SQLite databases for storing data all over the place. So you can use various tools to see it. And let's try another bunch of Cahoots. I like the music. They're starting to beg more for money, which I kind of see. I wonder if they're going to go broke soon. That's why I kept local copies of everything. If you use a cloud service, especially a free service, they could just yank it at any moment. So be ready for that, right? So I keep wondering, why am I not paying these people money? This makes me nervous. Anyway. But I'm an evil American capitalist. I feel like if you're not paying money, something is wrong. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. All right. So where are the system logs? And the system domain. And by the way, I don't believe the domain is like stored on the file. It's just a logical organization of how they organize the system. Anyway, so where is ets and /bin? Classic Unix stuff. Okay, that's also in system. That's standard Unix operating system. All right, where do you find installed apps? They're in local. That's what it is. All right, and which one is empty? All right, that'll be the network one. There's some kind of legacy not used anymore. So, all right, let's see if I can figure this out. Kaz is one twice, and I got Jim. Okay, good, good. Okay, good. All right, and who's nice music? That's you. Okay, good. Right. Okay, good. Okay, good. Good. All right. Well, I've got you folks. Good. Well, then we'll carry on here. So, all right. So now we'll talk system domain. So you've got, you might just care about the operating system logs. That might be all you care about if you're not really trying to catch individuals doing bad things. You got the system directory. This has got, this is where applications maintain their persistence. So you've got system logs and databases. Your system sleep images here, which might sound good, but it's not easy to read as far as I know. By the way, you can't even read direct RAM images on the Mac, not any more recent than about 5 versions back, because the Mac started compressing their memory, which is, by the way, extremely brilliant. PCs do not compress memory. So if you have 4 gigs of RAM and you fill it up, it has to start putting stuff on the hard drive, which slows it down by a factor of 1,000. But Macs start zipping the RAM, which slows you down by a much smaller factor. And I'm surprised that PCs haven't wised up to that. That's pretty brilliant. Yeah.
How long does it take to decrypt it?
I don't know, but I know zipping RAM has got to be a whole lot faster than using the hard drive. So, I mean, what they do is they have an intermediate step. When they start, you have 4 gigs of RAM and you try to open 8 gigs of apps, they just zip it to fit it in 4 gigs of RAM, which is a lot better than putting 4 gigs of it on the hard drive, which is what a PC would do.
What kind of algorithm do they use?
They have some kind of driver, and it's proprietary, and they don't tell you. And that's, but if you just take a RAM image with a simple RAM scraping tool, you can't read it anymore. It's zipped. And so you need another tool to unzip it. And as far as I know, there's nothing free that will do it.
Does it do like full program or just like bits and pieces?
I don't know the answer. It's a very good question. I just know when you try taking RAM images on a Mac, you get this mess, and then you wish you had a tool. And I didn't try to invent my own tool, but that's the problem with Macs. Like I say, that the free tools are like 5 versions behind. Mac keeps changing things a lot, so the free tool won't work anymore. And nobody will give you a free copy of the new tool that works, because Mac people are used to paying money. This is why people like to be iOS developers, because people that use iOS will think nothing of paying 10 or 20 bucks for an app. And you can't get Android people to pay 99 cents for an app. They want everything to be free. So Apple people, the whole point of Apple, it's like a luxury car. You're just going to turn you upside down and shake out your money, and it's going to keep happening as long as you own Apple stuff. I remember making the decision to switch to Apple. I said, I know what's going to happen. You'll be spending a pile of money forever. You have to be ready for that. And so developers don't give away stuff for free. They don't need to. They can charge money for Mac stuff. Anyway, so you got the user domain, of course. This is where you have all the usual stuff you expect, documents and desktop and pictures and all that jazz, and your trash directory. You even have a user-specific trash directory, which is not the case on a PC. It's kind of nice. And so here's some specific things to look for. They have LDAP for enterprise management and directory service for local user management. One enormous problem with Apple is there's no such thing as a domain controller, which is ridiculous. And this is why there was a very famous Apple commercial during the Super Bowl about 12 years ago, where they had the PC drones sitting miserably in cubicles wearing suits, and the Apple person is like funky and fun and running around smashing their established order. And they have this attitude that they are anti-corporation, anti-establishment. They don't want to think that someone is sitting in rows working miserably in cubicles on Macs. So they don't make it work for corporations. So people have to work on PCs, because if you want, say, where's the tool to control the software on my 1,000 workstations and push out an update and make sure that nothing unauthorized is running, Apple has nothing for you, because they don't really want to help you. So they deliberately cut themselves out of the corporate market. And it is kind of nuts. And as far as I know, all the people I talk to, their system administrators, they have to pay for Casper, which is some kind of third-party imitation domain controller to try to give that service for the Macs. And everybody now has to have 2 domain controllers, one Casper and one real domain controller, trying to manage, because everybody wants Macs, of course, except your IT department that doesn't want to try to manage Macs because they're incredibly painful. Like until recently, you couldn't even find out what version of things were with any kind of network query on the Mac or something like that. It's crazy. They are extremely hostile to what you would need to do it in a corporation. They only think about home users. It happened to us. We bought a bunch of iPads, got them in a cart. They gave them to some students to set up. They were college equipment, but iPads do not have any way to register them as college equipment. You have to register them with one person's iCloud account. And so a student did that, then left, and we were locked out of our own stuff. And this happened to many people because they don't understand company equipment, not owned by one person. They only think about a home user, and they think about it being your whole life on your phone, and it's going to be a personal device, and it's going to be buried with you. And it's frustrating to companies that want to use company machines, but that's the way it is. I had to go trick the Apple store into letting me back in the stuff that had been locked by people that left. Had to take the receipt there, and they would hack into it for me, which I understand they can hardly do anymore. Anyway, so that's the game. They do have this directory services for what it's worth. Yeah.
Isn't the proprietary thing good for security?
Well, that is a big argument. keeping things secret and proprietary is what some people call security. Most people would say it would be better to just be open about what you're doing and do the right thing. Like really encrypt it with a strong, because if you keep it a secret, it's very disturbing because frequently it turns out you're doing something horrible like Rot 13 and that was your secret. If you were doing something intelligent like AES, you wouldn't have to keep it secret. That's the idea, but no one really knows. And then there's the US military where they both do something strong and keep it secret. And they think that's more secure and they're probably right about that. But I know like Skype, for example, Skype had this super encryption and nobody could get in, and the FBI offered $1 million for anybody that would hack in. And when Microsoft bought Skype, they gave them a backdoor into it, but before that happened, the secret leaked out, it was just AES. That was their super secret encryption system, but that was unbreakable, they were right, but that was they didn't let anybody know what it was, but it was something good. Anyway, so you got a private var db ds local. This has your directory service data, which, and this is one place you'll find in here is your password hash. It is not easy to get your password hashes on the Mac. This is my password hash. I blacked out some of it. Good luck. I suppose in principle, somebody could try to deduce my password in less than eternity with whatever's left on this slide. Good luck with that. The password hash is extremely long. It is SHA-512 and 5,000 rounds of it, I think, just like Mac. It is huge. And by the way, I did this like on my old machine, maybe 3 versions back, OS 10. I tried to do it today on the latest version of OS 10, and you can't do it anymore. I was able to decode it here, turn it into base 64, and then you have a SHA-512, 5,000 round hash, good with the salt, which is essentially unbreakable. I mean, unless your password is easily in a short dictionary, you're not going to find it anytime soon. But the new ones, you can't even read them as root, not at all. The only thing you can do is boot to recovery mode, and then only if certain features are not turned on will you be able to see it at all. So Apple, like everybody else, has made it even more and more and more behind more barriers, more secure. I can't even find the password hash on my latest Mac. And that is, of course, what it should be. Everybody makes it tougher and tougher to get there. Even root can't do it. I know PCs try to do this. Even the administrator can't see the hash. You have to elevate the system. And apparently, nobody has figured out how to elevate high enough to get it out of a running Mac. All right, here's other options. You've got aliases. You got Kerberos information. I'm not quite sure where a Mac uses Kerberos. I know Microsoft uses it for Active Directory logins over the network, and I'm not quite sure what a Mac uses it for. Yeah.
Why couldn't you get the password hash with like a kernel extension? That is
a logical thing to try a kernel extension. As far as I know, there's no free tool that works. The blog I read was from like 2 weeks ago. The latest way to do it, the only way to do it now is to boot your machine into recovery mode, and then only if certain features are turned off. And I would imagine if, like my Mac, you have encryption turned on, because they strongly encourage you to turn encryption on, I think you're hosed even in recovery mode. And that's, of course, the idea. It's I'm supposed to be able to lose this thing on an airplane and not worry because nobody's getting in there. And I think that's largely true. Anyway.
If you boot with an older version of the OS, that can still be the partition.
It's possible, but if it's encrypted, I think you're hosed.
Yeah, here it's encrypted.
And they're all encrypted by default now, and mine is.
Yeah, yours are default, I guess.
Yeah.
It's on fresh, maybe not.
Yeah, if I turned off the encryption, then I think that would be possible.
But if you did it yourself, maybe it would be no encryption by default.
Well, you can turn it off, but it's on unless you remember to turn it off. They strongly encourage you to turn it on. And they're right, of course. It makes you much safer. Anyway, here's other information here. It's got these SQL indexes that have creation and modification times of all the plist files, so you know when applications were installed, when they were modified, and so on. And this is all backed up as also to a DS local backup. So there's probably some historical information there, which is good. So you can see when a share was created, whether an account existed, and its privilege level. So you can see a list of privileges and password policy options for various things a user has been doing. This is very much like Microsoft Windows registry information. You get some information about what people have been doing historically. And there are Sharepoints for all the things shared over various protocols: Apple Filing Protocol, Microsoft's SMB, and FTP, the generic one that you can share all with all these services, and you'll find the information when these shares are created. You got trash, many different trash cans all over the place for different purposes. And even if you delete things from USB, they go into the trash can on the USB. So there's a pretty good chance of recovering deleted files if they put it in the trash and didn't empty the trash. If they do empty the trash, not so much. As we talked about, the only thing you're going to find there is probably USB sticks and magnetic hard drives, if anybody's still running Macs with magnetic hard drives, which I don't think very many people are doing anymore. SSDs, you're pretty much toast because of garbage collection. Yeah?
What's the best way to hide files?
Best way to what?
To hide files.
To hide files. Well, I don't really know. There are different systems. I know if you get TrueCrypt, there's a way to make a hidden encrypted volume, which doesn't even appear to be there. But I don't know if you can do it on a Mac. You can do it on a PC. Macs have this. If you just turn on the default encryption, and then they don't have your password, they really can't get in if the machine is turned off. So I mean, that's the default situation is really very good. And I do know if you have a phone, you can go to restore it to factory settings, and all that data is 100% gone. That has been tested. A forensic company bought 100 used iPhones, and they tried to retrieve the data, and they couldn't get any data off any of them because it really works. And the reason it works is encryption is on right from the start before you start using it. And when you hit set back to factory defaults, it just deletes the key. So it only takes a fraction of a second, and all that data is gone, gone, gone.
And then they search and see the cloud.
The cloud copy is not encrypted, and it's on Microsoft servers in Azure because Apple can't run servers. And that's true. So if you want to keep secrets, you ought to turn off iCloud, obviously, and Dropbox and all those things, because obviously that's sending your data. And Google Drive, obviously don't use any of those, or somebody else has your stuff. But if you put something, say, on an iPhone or an iMac, or even a Mac here, and choose a password that people can't guess, it's pretty hidden. It's hidden so much the FBI can't get it. And they're very, very sore about that. So, I mean, that's pretty well hidden, yeah.
Now, with SSDs, can you use hardware key in conjunction with open source audited software key?
I don't know exactly how to do that, but it is a good plan. I know the big scandal came out about a month ago that most of the encrypted hard drives do not properly encrypt the volumes. They actually, the problem is, for some reason, the standard for encrypted hard drives is incredibly burdensome. It's not enough to just have one password to get on the drive, which is all you need for most people. The official standard to meet the specification says you have to make it possible for multiple users to have their own area of the drive with their own password. And that is too burdensome for the firmware. So what everyone does is they do that in the software on the PC, and everything on the drive is really stored with all one key, which you can find. So it turns out all you have to do is hack the software to take your password, and then it will decrypt the drive. That's a common mistake on most encrypted hard drives don't work at all. So adding some third-party software you can trust, like TrueCrypt, would be better. But as far as anybody knows, the built-in encryption on the Mac is fine. However, this was the scandal last month. Microsoft's built-in encryption is garbage because FileVault is okay in itself, but what FileVault does is if you put in a drive that is already encrypted by the drive's firmware, FileVault, Microsoft's BitLocker turns itself off and says, oh, I don't need to encrypt it, it's already encrypted. And it turned out that the firmware encryption is all crap. So most PCs that say they're encrypted are not really encrypted securely. And I don't think Apple makes that error because Apple doesn't really support using non-Apple hardware. It all comes together. So they're not going to trust somebody else to have their encryption, like Toshiba or something. It's all Apple all the way through. That's why you pay so much. So I think it's all encrypted with their official encryption. And as far as I've heard, it's perfectly fine. It's as good as any of them. The only thing you can do to get in is the cold boot attack. Yeah.
Isn't TrueCrypt deprecated or supplanted by Bureau?
Yeah, TrueCrypt was abandoned by its developers, but as far as anybody knows, it's okay. And I think there's VeraCrypt is the, VeraCrypt is the replacement, which is the same thing, except they audited it and said it was okay. But yeah, but as far as anybody knows, the proprietary products, FileVault and BitLocker are perfectly fine, except BitLocker just had a scandal. But I don't think that would apply to Apple. At least that particular problem won't happen on Apple's. There might be something wrong with Apple's too, but nothing has leaked out about it. Yeah.
Isn't BitLocker TPM?
BitLocker, isn't it secure with the TPM, you say?
Yeah.
The answer is no, because if your hard drive has firmware encryption, BitLocker does not encrypt it and it doesn't tell you. It says, oh, I'm not going to bother putting a second layer of encryption. And then it turns out and they say, this is insane because you don't know who made that hard drive. It could be some idiot that did it wrong, which in fact it is. And then you'll be sorry. You said, oh, it's encrypted. I don't need to re-encrypt it.
So it's just not using any hardware or
It doesn't use the TPM or anything. It trusts the firmware in the drive, which says, oh, I'm encrypted, which it really ought to warn you. But this, Microsoft has, the problem with Microsoft is they don't typically control everything. They expect you to put in third-party hardware, third-party software. They have a whole policy of taking like software, and if it has a digital signature from a company, they'll accept it and run it because they trust other companies. Microsoft is not a standalone company. They're totally in a huge ecosystem, and they expect you using other people's stuff all the time, whereas Apple really wants it to be 100% Apple all the way through. And of course, that means a lot of things are going to be safer and all much more expensive and more limited. Like if you want a Mac that isn't one of like the 3 sizes, good luck. You get 3 sizes, that's it, small, medium, and large. Other than that, you go off their map and they don't support it. Anyway, you've got an auditing system, just like on PCs. There is a default logging and auditing system that, just like in Windows, the default configuration does not audit much of anything because auditing is expensive, but you can turn on auditing and log things if you want to, and then this is the open basic security model. It will then log who's been going in a folder, who's been installing apps, who's been connecting to the network, and everything else if you turn all that jazz on. So there's a file called audit control you can use to turn on auditing, and that's what you might want to do in a corporation, but a typical machine used just fine probably won't have much auditing turned on. So this is a configuration you can put in that will then log everything for all users, log out, log in, log out administrative events, processes, networking activity. So this will give you much more log information, and I presume waste more battery power and slow down the machine as it does a lot of extra work. There are a bunch of helper services running in the background, just like on PCs. There are like 60 or 80 services running every time you boot it up, providing many things. There's a long list of them, just like on PC. Here's just a few of them. The airport manages wireless connections. Here's the Find My Mac service. Remember, that's installed by default everywhere, and you can't find it or turn it off because that's the whole point of it. If someone steals your Mac, you can find out where it is. Here's the pasteboard. This is the clipboard in Microsoft where copy and paste goes. Here's data sharing, and here's Spin Dump Agent. That's the crash application, the spinning wheel of death, which is Apple's version of the blue screen of death. When that happens, Spin Dump Agent is what can make a dump of the app memory so you can debug it, just like in Windows, you get crash dumps.
That
Yeah.
can be the same account.
What's that?
Do the Find My Mac, right? You have to set up
Yes, the whole point of Find My Mac is logging where your Mac is all the time, and to access that data, you have to log into iCloud. That's the idea, so other people can't track you with it. They need your iCloud password.
So that, it's maybe better to just have 2 accounts set up on it, so it's not only 1 account. So if you lost your iPad versus your laptop, they have to get into both accounts. So
Well,
you want the person to find you, if they somehow got into your account, then they'll find where you are by either iPad, iPhone, phone connection, or.
No, I think that's a good idea, but that is exactly the kind of stuff you can't do on Macs, which is what drives everybody nuts. Like there ought to be a way to have a personal account and a corporate account for the corporate.
Separate accounts.
I know, but as far as this is the problem with Apple stuff. They only think about home users. So there is one iCloud. You have to log into iCloud. It has to be one account for the whole machine and everything on the machine. It's messed up. There are many use cases in which you'd like to do something like that, and Apple is not there for you. You each buy your own device. That's their answer. And they are not thinking about like corporations where you actually have a shared device that is shared by many people, but really controlled by the boss and then passed from people to people. They aren't there for you in that case, which is a drag.
There's one thing I can help the Mac. It's not like Windows. Like you can play with DHDs and put files in it and encrypt it, and then leave it. On the Mac, it's like you made a DMG, gray.
Yeah, that's why it's
not encrypted, and it's in the drive that is encrypted.
This is why it's important to remember, Apple has always been the closed source shop. They used to take the serial numbers off the chips. You were not allowed to do anything except use the software they gave you. You were not supposed to do anything. The PC, Windows, was the bastion of freedom where you could customize it and do things. Before there was Linux out there, Linux was the ultimate freedom. You could do anything you want. PCs were considered super free. I could change the hardware. I can add other apps. The Mac was locked down to where you're just stuck with whatever they give you, like an iPhone. Nothing can go on except what's in the store. If you want something that Apple disapproves of, you just can't have it. They're still in that tradition. They're not a general purpose computer. They're only intended to offer certain services. And they say, if you want more freedom, go get a PC or an Android and ruin that thing. That's why it's all full of malware. So
it's secure sharing. If you do DHT encrypted for Windows, obviously you encrypted the image. But with Mac, it's not like I'm going to share this image and it's going to be encrypted and I don't have to worry about it. That's true, right?
That's the whole thing about OS 10. You're trapped in their little world. That's why some people, like Courtney Brown, our teacher here, he buys Macs and then wipes them off and puts Linux on it. Because he doesn't want all those restrictions.
Encrypted image image separately, I would use a third-party tool.
You would totally, yeah.
And which one do you recommend?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure what's best on the, I'm sure there's a bunch of open source Unix-based encryption stuff that'll do it. There's a lot of fancy file services. So here's Airport D. Airport D will have a plist file showing your preferences, and that's going to have a list of all the wireless networks you've connected to. So here's all the ones I connected to at one time. These are ASCII. You should recognize this. These are hexadecimal ASCII characters. So this one is Doom, that one is Dr. Evil, that's my cell phone, on it goes. It stores the names of the networks it's connected to, so you can see what it's been doing. This is a famous privacy problem with all Apple products, and as far as I know, it's still true. Every time you boot up an iPhone, it sends the MAC address of the last 5 routers you connected to off, trying to reconnect to the existing router. So if you want to stalk somebody, you can just sit in a coffee shop till they come in, wait for them to turn on their phone, and you will get the MAC address of the last 5 devices they connected to, which will lead you right to their home and their workplace and everything else. All you need is Wireshark, and I think they've never fixed that. There's been a big argument about it, because what they're trying to do is connect more quickly if it's a common place you go. Maybe they finally fixed that. That was a big scandal years ago, but I'm not sure they ever did. Anyway, so here's a list of networks. There's another tool that will show them to me. Here's all the networks I've been to, various coffee shops and stuff. And so you got logs all over the place and forensic artifacts in various formats, storing lots of things. There's 3 kinds of files created, which is kind of nuts. This is user 501 in the name. And here's, I think, group ID. And here's events from this user and that group on a certain time. And so these are various kinds of logs being kept, and one of them is nuts because they put the wrong year on it, which is very annoying. This is the one. BB is authentication logs, and they add 1 to the year. This is like the kind of stupidity I don't expect from Apple. I'd expect this from Microsoft. Apparently somebody thought you should keep it for a year, so they gave it a date that's a year from now in the title. This is Microsoft pinheaded boss kind of thinking. Not what you'd expect. Anyway, that's the point. So it will tell you the wrong year. So I did this in 2015. So this file says 2016, the BB files, and it's plain text. So, you know, everybody has to have some stupid left in there. And so here's the back traces, AUX. Oh, these are the ones that are plain text. These ones aren't plain text, but they're dated a year late. These ones are plain text. They're folders. You can go in here and read plain text logs. The other ones you have to read with PR on it because they're not plain text. So these are crash recovery files showing when an application crashed. It's stored information about it here, and you can see why. So here's some log entries. If you erase a flash drive, it'll record that here. That's Apple Disk Management Erase. Here's a failed login attempt, verify password, failure, unknown error. That just like in Windows, you'll have an event log for failed logins. Those are really important because they show bad guys trying to get in typically. You'll find the iCloud, Time Machine, iTunes all recorded here. And those are super important for investigations because they mean there is another device somewhere with data, and you better go hunt for that device and see if it has more information on it. And then they've got scheduled tasks. Apple used to use cron, now they use LaunchD. People seem to hate cron. I like cron, but cron is super old-fashioned. Everybody's moved to other things. So they use launch daemons and launch agents, and that's what they're using instead. I know it's systemd in Unix. And so you've got various parameters like everything else, start on mount, watch paths, keep alive. This is just to find the same thing in Microsoft scheduled tasks, conditions under which to launch and all that jazz. And when an application is installed, it puts 2 files in, a bill of materials and a plist in the receipts folder. Receipts are a record of what it installed. So you've got a bill of materials and a plist file. And so here's the plist file. You can read it with plutil, and it shows you the name of the application, install date, and so on. This is HexFiend, my favorite hex editor, and it's written by someone that calls themselves Ridiculous Fish. And then here's the bill of materials. You use LSBOM to see it, and the bill of materials is hundreds of lines long. It lists every single file with a timestamp for every file that we used in building this app and installing this app. So I guess that's the information it uses for uninstall or something, but anyway, it's all there. Lots of information about when somebody put that app on there. A complete inventory of files. So here's what you got for the Mac. timeline analysis is very rich. There are all these artifacts store information about times, document revisions, application installs, cron jobs, the Spotlight indexer that shows where every file is, syslog, all over the place. There are timestamps everywhere. So you can totally track down what's happened, went here, they went there, which is very good. If you want to see services and shares, those are there. If you want a static image of your hard drive, for example, then you might be able to get this information off it. Although these days, with the hard drive encrypted by default, I don't think you can get a static image anymore. Only on older versions of OS or ones where they didn't turn on encryption, I think there's no way to get a static image. All you can get is a live image, as far as I know. And so if you want to find out that the file was opened, there is a thing called recent items for the 10 most recent items, just like every other OS, because they want to have like the 10 last. So that's there. And you can change it to more. I always do it on my Mac to show like the last 50, because I always have a lot of files. You got trash bins all over the place. So that might give you artifacts about deleted files. And there are files for persistence. This is just like Microsoft Auto Start extensibility points, like the run keys. There are launch agents, launch daemons, and startup items for all the things that automatically launch, and you can find things there, of course. And if you want to know who's logged in, there are authentication logs and file system logs, timestamps in the directory, the profile directory, and so on, just like there would be in any other OS. If somebody connects and logs in, there's going to be a bunch of records of when that happened, and that's, of course, important. Anyway, so I got the last batch of Cahoots here. Exit. And routine C. All right. So the names are different, but it's pretty much the same as Windows. If you're doing something on a computer and trying to lie about it later, good luck. There are fingerprints all over the place. That's true. And people do mess with the time zone and everything. That's an issue. I'll give it a few more seconds because I think there were 10 before. And it may be that 3 people fell asleep. I'm not sure, but maybe so.
It would be more fun if you set the date for 10 years from now instead of the current date. So it's like, you know, then it's also
well, then I wouldn't be able to open websites or anything. Now that everything is HTTPS, you can't have your clock wrong so painlessly. You could. Yes, if you change their clock, they won't be able to open the web pages anymore. All right, here we go. All right, so which Unix feature is missing? Ah. It does not have ets password and ets shadow. That's the old system. Like I say, it's marked. The hashes are hidden much more deeply, very hard to find. That's the old Unix system of password hashes. The Mac has another whole layer of obfuscation and security on top of it. All right, which one manages connections to wireless networks? Okay, that's Airport D, a good name. All right, where's a log of all network connections? It's OpenBSM. That's something manager. It's the thing that logs things. All right, where's the backtrace for a crashed app? Yeah. Sorry about that. A few of these get esoteric. That's the way they are. It's the aux thing. The aux thing is the crashed app. All right. Well, you didn't know that? What's wrong with you? Anyway, and so what file is created when an application is installed? That's the bill of materials. Okay, anyway, so there we are. So Melanson has won twice, and Jeff has won 3 times. And I see S. Weed there. I'll put that on here. Good. So S. Weed. Good. So those are the winners. All right. Well, I've run out of things to tell you. I'll stick around to answer any questions, but that's it. There's an online final you can take. You can turn in stuff until the 20th to make up for the time we've lost with smoke and all this nonsense. Last quiz is extra credit. So all this baffling stuff about the Mac I considered a bit above, won't be on the final. So this is just in the iClickers and in the extra credit quiz. Okay, good. All right. All right. So I'm going to stop the recording and I'll put this up after we get to the lab. Okay. Yeah, I figured that's the thing to do.